So good evening and welcome to Copperfield's Books virtual event with Oren Jay Sofer. I'm really pleased you all could be with us this evening as we celebrate his brand new book, Your Heart Was Made for This: Contemplative Practices for Meeting a World in Crisis with Courage, Integrity, and Love. My name is Jamie and I'll be your co-host for the evening. So just a couple notes before we get started. The virtual format tonight will be between 35 to 45 minutes of speaking and will be followed by a live Q&A. For any questions or comments you have tonight, please go ahead and submit them under the Q&A icon, which is the bottom right of your screen. And you can also submit them in the chat box, and this can be done at any time during the presentation, so you don't need to wait. Additionally, books. If you purchased your copy before November 23rd, they all went out in Friday's mail, so they are on the way to you. If you purchased on November 23rd or after, we will be getting yours in the mail tomorrow. And we still have a few signed copies available that I will be sharing how you can purchase later in the program. But now I'm really excited to introduce our special guest this evening. Oren Jay Sofer teaches Buddhist meditation, mindfulness, and communication internationally. He holds a degree in comparative religion from Columbia University and is a certified trainer of nonviolent communication and a somatic experiencing practitioner for the healing of trauma. Born and raised in New Jersey, he is the author of several books, including the best-selling title, Say What You Mean, A Mindful Approach to Nonviolent Communication. His teachings have reached people around the world through his online communication courses and guided meditations. Oren lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife and son, where he enjoys cooking, spending time in nature, and home woodworking projects. Welcome, Oren. I'm so thrilled you could be with us tonight, and I'm going to hand it straight over to you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you to you. Thank you to Copperfield Books for inviting me and hosting the event. And thank you to all of you who are here listening and joining. It's really sweet to see your names. I'm sad I can't see your faces, but really touched to see the names of some good friends and folks here this evening. So it's quite humbling for me, actually, to be sharing with you about this book. It's such a timely topic that I find myself these days challenged to continue practicing what I have aspired to and written the book about, which is this deep question of how can our inner lives be not only a support, but an active agent in meeting the difficult crises and really heartrending circumstances of our world today. So I thought for the evening I could speak a little bit about the book, some more about my process experience writing it, maybe share one or two stories and teachings from the book. Then we could do a short practice together, and then from there move into some questions and conversation, like Jamie said. So I started writing this book about 3 years ago, during 2020, after the pandemic, George Floyd, wildfires out here in the West. As a meditation teacher, one of the ways I felt like I could contribute was to write about some of the qualities that could help us through that really difficult year, and not just go into panic mode or overwhelm, but actually identify and build up our inner resources to contend with what was happening. So this was the initial impetus of the book, was to explore the cultivation of inner resources to meet the challenges of our times. This then took on a kind of deeper significance for me the following year, when my wife came to me and asked me if I wanted to have a child, which was not something we had discussed previously and wasn't sort of in our life plan together. And when she got pregnant, these questions of how can our contemplative practice be a resource for the times that we're living through took on a deeper significance as the scope of my vision moved beyond my own lifetime to the future generation in a more very personal and intimate way. And so the book began to take shape, not just around how do we cultivate inner resources, which in some sense is a very straightforward question for a meditation teacher, but more what's the connection between individual change, our inner life, and social change, collective change. And it had this very deep personal significance for me, looking back over the last 25 years and how much time I've devoted to meditation, internal transformation, communication, relational transformation, and wanting to place those in the context of collective transformation and make sense of that, make new connections. So a lot of the book, and particularly the second draft of the book, was this very deep engagement with that question. So the book is structured around different qualities, traits, positive inner strengths that we can cultivate. The idea is that it can be kind of a companion for us in our lives. There are 26 chapters, so if you take 2 weeks for each chapter, you have a whole year of learning and growth and transformation and exploration. And my vision really for the book, even though there's a structure and there are different sort of like arcs in the book as one reads it, but really particularly given how unpredictable and chaotic our lives can be and how rapidly our world is changing, the idea is really that you can open the book up and look through the table of contents and say, oh, that's what I need right now. You know, I really need some rest. Or, gosh, I could really use some joy in my life right now. Let's take a couple of weeks to focus on joy. Or this heartbreaking thing just happened. You know, how do I cultivate more compassion for myself, for my loved one? And in that way, it can be a resource that can meet us wherever we're at. And that's so much of what I think and what I'm finding right now in my own life is needed, is not so much to have a sense of where we're trying to get to or internally, but engaging with the truth of our experience and listening deeply and asking, what is really needed right now? And then honoring that. So I want to say a couple more words about some of the just general thrust of the book, maybe read a short passage, and then talk about two of these qualities in particular. So the whole trajectory of this book is based upon a very fundamental property in human consciousness, which is that our hearts, our minds are malleable. They're not fixed. We come into this world primed to learn and to grow. And not only that, but the process of learning, before we take on a lot of the baggage of our society and different cultures and conditioning, is quite fun. It's filled with vitality and interest and discovery and frustration and challenge, but we learn through play and exploration. So how do we take this innate capacity that we have to learn, to grow, to change internally and build new connections, new meanings, new understandings, new ways of being, and use it to our advantage, not just when we're, say, practicing an instrument or trying to learn a language or something else, but all the time, every day? How do we make every day meaningful so that we're using our time in the most effective way possible? In everything we do, we can say that there's two things happening. There's what we're doing. So right now, I'm sitting here in my office, looking into a camera, speaking to you. You are at home, at work, somewhere, looking at a device, listening. There's what's happening, yeah? You're cutting vegetables for dinner, you're sweeping the yard. More important, though, than what we're doing from this perspective is how we're doing it. How are we engaging in the activities of our life? So as I sit here and speak to you, am I rushing through? Am I trying to pretend to be something in order to get you to like me or feel like I can live up to this title or this thing that I wrote? Am I reinforcing that way of being? As you're chopping the vegetables, are you feeling tense and rushing and thinking about something else? Strengthening impatience, distraction, tension. So how are we doing the things that we do every day? How are we living? How are we moving through our lives? This is the art of contemplative practice, of recognizing that the way we are living not only has an effect in the moment on ourselves, on the task at hand and those around us, but it is actively shaping and reshaping our inner world. It is continually strengthening certain pathways, to use a kind of neuroscientific language, or strengthening those neural networks, giving preference to certain ways of being and thinking. Or to use the language of the Buddhist psychology, we're watering certain seeds in our consciousness. So are we watering the seeds of anxiety, of disconnection, of impatience, of distraction as we move through our days? Or are we making conscious choices about how we use our attention and how we live, and thereby watering seeds of patience, of kindness, of connection, of compassion, of wonder, of beauty? This is possible. But it takes a certain kind of intentionality. It takes a certain skill. And this, in some ways, is the ultimate skill, because it's learning how to learn. It's learning how to reshape the very mechanism, the very instrument of the human organism, so that we can have access to this incredible, beautiful array of resources and qualities in the human heart. What is the connection between this and the madness around us in the world, all of the different institutions of our society coming apart at the edges, the violence that's bubbling up to the surface in so many parts of the world? I want to read just a short passage from the introduction that summarizes some of my thinking that's then borne out in the book through the different chapters. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, spoke of this choice to take meditation practice into the streets of the Vietnamese villages where bombs were falling. He said, mindfulness must be engaged. Once there is seeing, there must be acting. Otherwise, what's the use of seeing? So he's speaking there of the origin of what's known as engaged Buddhist practice, this understanding that what we cultivate internally expresses itself externally, and then to some degree, that's the point of it. Personal and social transformation are inextricably linked. Focusing on internal transformation without also applying our love and wisdom to the world, we may fail to respond effectively to the suffering of others. Similarly, if we focus solely on external transformation without simultaneously healing our hearts, we risk recreating the very ills we seek to address. How many revolutions have unwittingly replaced one domination system with another? So we strive for individual action and structural change to support each other. Individual actions can further the ethical evolution of culture, shifting the moral compass of society. I go on to give the example of Greta Thunberg's activism and how her individual embodiment of certain qualities changed the whole sort of scene of climate activism. And yet at the same time, pervasive systemic issues require systemic solutions. Global heating, climate feedback loops, the ensuing scale of devastation on the planet demand a different order of action than individual responses. Profoundly aware of this, Thunberg laments that in spite of her celebrity and the enormous activism growing from it, governments have not acted meaningfully toward climate targets. So the two are linked. They need to support each other. So how we live and how we shape our inner world, our hearts, the qualities that we bring to bear on our life, this positions us to be more effective. It inspires us to choose wisely where we place our attention and our energy, whether it's within our family, our community, on a political level, locally, nationally, or globally. And the more we cultivate these qualities, the more we're able to align means with ends. The more our work for change in the world can actually embody the vision of what it is we're working towards, so that in a way we kind of become like a node of healing and transformation in a much wider network of change that's so far beyond what any of us can see or be aware of directly. So I want to talk about two particular qualities that have been kind of at the forefront for me lately. One is courage, and the other is compassion. And maybe before I go into those, another one of the themes that runs through the book is this theme of balance, and the way that different qualities, and maybe I can just read down a few of the qualities in the table of contents so you have a sense of what I'm referring to, the way these different qualities balance and inform each other. So I'm speaking of things like curiosity, courage, renunciation, kindness, ease, patience, equanimity, empathy, integrity, joy, rest, wonder, gratitude, generosity, devotion, play, compassion. So there's a way that there's an energetic relationship between different qualities. I talk about it using the metaphor of the yin-yang and Taoist philosophy, that there's this balancing of opposites, each of which has an aspect of the other within it. So we can see this with something like rest and energy, kind of very obvious balancing, right? In order to have energy, we need to rest, right? And then within our use of energy, there's some amount of, are we able to be at ease? And within our accessing of rest, we're connected to the flow of our energy, sort of allowing things to let go, to settle, allowing new energy to come in. There's this relationship, this interplay between them. Similarly, we can see a mutually supportive balancing effect between qualities like, say, compassion on the one hand, and joy or wonder on the other. And compassion is this tenderness that softens the heart, that opens us to grieving, to pain, to a strong and caring response. And joy fills us, it lifts us, it brightens us. So we can't have one without the other. And many of the questions that I've been receiving on these calls for the book and other teaching really have to do with folks just feeling kind of crushed by the news cycle and by the intensity of the suffering in our world on a daily basis. How do I keep my heart open? How do I not just go into despair or freeze? And so some of what's needed there, I think, is this balancing. We can't sustain compassion indefinitely without also being able to rest, to refill, to allow our hearts to be nourished with joy. A couple of weeks ago, a friend and colleague of mine came over for dinner, and we were watching afterwards. She and my wife and I and our little 14-month-old son was running around the house screaming, having fun. And we were watching teach-in about the situation in Israel and Gaza. It was very, very heavy, very painful, difficult to listen to the speeches. And my son was screaming and running and flaring his hands up in the air. And our friend, turned to us and she said, "This is perfect. There's no one else I would rather watch this with right now." She said, "He's making it possible for me to watch this." And right there was just this beautiful marriage, this juxtaposition of the agony of what was happening and this calling towards opening our hearts, towards grieving and compassion, and then just the spontaneous joy and vitality of our son running around and being able to hold both. In fact, the necessity of having both to support and inform each other, and his joy being that much sweeter, that much more precious and beautiful, given the context. So let's talk just a little bit about a couple of these qualities, just in a little bit more depth. I want to talk first about courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is the willingness to be present and even to move forward in the face of fear. Is the capacity to know fear intimately and directly and still be present and still take the next step in spite of the fear. That's true courage. Courage comes from the Latin root cor, which means heart, and it takes a lot of heart to meet life on its own terms, to look squarely at the truth of our own feelings, of our own situation, of the present historical moment we are in, still in the early part of this century with so much teetering in the balance. It takes tremendous courage. So where do we find that courage? How do we access it? How do we have the courage to just be ourselves, to not need to pretend, to be naked emotionally and say, this is what's true, this is how I feel, this is how it is for me. And take off the masks that we wear every day. Certain kind of courage that takes. And what's the cost? What's the risk of not having that courage? What happens when we shrink from opening to the truth of what's happening, of what is? And again, here's this balancing, right? It's like, it's neither all one way or the other. Sometimes we need to turn away. Sometimes we need a break. We need rest. But then can we come back? Can we return to that exploration? I learned a lot about courage from my meditation practice, which is kind of shocking in a way because you're not doing anything. One's just sitting there or walking. And yet, as any contemplative practice really, really deepens, one comes face to face with certain really profound existential questions, not intellectually, in a very visceral way. And so there were periods of needing to encounter tremendous fear and terror, and just to stay steady, to stay present with them. And so I mentioned having a child as a blessing of being able to bring a new life into this world. But when my wife came to me and asked me, it was not a simple or easy answer. In fact, I felt a lot of fear and reservations about it. But I engaged with that. I said, well, let's feel this, let's be with this on a personal level. I was able to just explore, like, what is this fear for me? And to identify, very clearly what it was that I felt afraid about the future for this child and where we're headed as a species. What world will he be born into? What will his life be? Where climate change is heading. And I felt afraid of the vulnerability that I would experience, that I am experiencing emotionally, knowing what it is to love in a world of change that we can't control, knowing that my heart would be outside my body in this other being, ultimately outside of my control to protect him. And that vulnerability, the excruciating uncertainty of it, frightened me. And I said, okay, let's do this. Let's explore. Let's learn. Let's be human. Let's be in this life fully. So how do we build courage? We need to draw on the places where we have it, and we need to work within the right range. So there's another concept I talk about in the book of with all of these capacities that we build, just knowing where our edge is and how to work just beyond it, not to stretch too far. This is a trauma-informed principle of taking things one step at a time, working in small, manageable bits. So just reflecting on, like, where and how have you known and experienced courage in your life? Where do you feel that strength to be real with what's happening, to engage head on with anything, whether it's, something very, very mundane, like this thing is broken and I don't want to deal with it and I need to make all these phone calls and it feels a little bit daunting, and okay, I'm just going to do it. Like, I have the energy, I'm just going to head on, I'm just going to face it, to something larger. Just seeing where do we know that? Where do we have that experience? What's it like for you? And then to build from there, to look at, okay, what's the very next step? What's the very next thing that I want to embody or develop courage for? And then to consider, what can support me in that? Is there some way that I can access this memory, this felt knowing of courage in my own body, in my own life? Represent it with an image, a word, a phrase, a song, a poem, and remind myself of it every day and come back to it. And so we build slowly, And the reason why I wanted to talk about courage tonight is I just think it takes so much courage to keep feeling today. Just to wake up in the morning and not, put the blinders on and shut down. And again, this theme of balance, that doesn't mean that, we're feeling everything all the time, right? The heart opens and closes. We engage and we rest. So there's that balance, there's that dialectic. So I'll talk briefly about one more quality, and then I want to do a practice before we move to some questions. So courage is one of these factors that brings us into relationship with what's happening, with what's true. Compassion helps us to stay. Compassion is this beautiful balm that allows us to stay in contact with the truth, which is so many different things and often hard. So compassion is a quality of strong tenderness. It's the resonance of the heart, this quivering of the heart in response to pain and suffering in life. It's like the harmonics on a stringed instrument. Compassion is that harmonic in our heart when there's suffering. And compassion has a receptive aspect, which is the resonance that we feel the suffering, that pang, and it has an active component. A receptive component feels, the active component of compassion responds. It's ready. It says, what do you need? How can I help? And my wife and I, in the last couple of years, personally, there've been a number of losses. Some of you, there's some friends of mine here on the call, and students, know my father passed away while I was writing the book, just before it came out. A couple of friends have lost children over the last few years. It's a tremendous need for compassion. And so the receptive aspect of compassion, we sit together, we cry together, we hold each other. It's just being with, just embracing. And a certain aspect of, for many in my community, the war in Israel and Gaza is kind of at the forefront of our minds, even though there's a lot of violence happening in other parts of the world simultaneously, in Ukraine, in Sudan, in Darfur. This capacity to bear witness, to just allow the heart to feel and be with, is one way of honoring what's happening and not losing touch with our humanity. This is the receptive aspect of compassion. Active aspect of compassion is ready to respond. So on this personal level, it says, what do you need from the store? It, drops off soup. Just picks up the phone and says, hey, I'm here for you. Let me know if there's anything I can do. On this larger level, the compassion aspect, it donates for aid, calling Congress, getting involved, reaching out. Some friends and colleagues of ours, some of us here on the call, are talking about sending a delegation to Israel, Palestine, a nonviolent delegation, to try to do some work and see what can be offered through presence, through loving, nonviolent, courageous presence. So that active component of compassion responds. It's there to help. And so for ourselves, just in our own hearts, as we go through just the changes of our lives, these different movements of society, and these vast shifts in technology and economics and in the environment and political scene that are happening, are we able to stay connected to a quality of tenderness for ourselves, to recognize it's not easy to be human and to be awake to all of this? And then out of that resonance, out of that connection, to have the strength to know what's needed. How do I help? How do I help first and foremost here, so that I'm coming from a place that's grounded as much as possible, that's clear, that's available, that's present. That in and of itself is this huge offering in our world. To be a clear-headed, balanced, stable, loving presence in the face of distraction and reactivity and polarization. Just that loving presence is itself already a contribution. And then to be able to act from that place is even more powerful. So there's so much more to say, of course, but I want to do a brief practice together. So what I thought to do is to maybe just share kind of a general template for some of the practices that I do in the book. And rather than focusing on one specific quality, instead to invite you to just explore another way of connecting with your inner life and strengthening. So I just invite you to get comfortable. You can sit, recline, whatever feels good for your body. You might take a deep breath or two, roll your neck or your shoulders, whatever helps you to shift gears and settle in inside. You can let your eyes close or just kind of lower your gaze, just a way of turning the volume down on the visual field. And take a moment to just feel the weight of your body resting on the ground. You might feel your hands in your lap, just anything that helps you to get a little bit quiet, to feel centered or present. If it's supportive, you could take a few deep breaths. Emphasizing any sense of relaxation, ease, or letting go as you exhale. So this is just one aspect of any kind of inner cultivation, is just this capacity to slow down, settle a little bit. There are many practices in the book that support that. I invite you to bring to mind a memory, an image that lifts your heart. Any memory or image that lifts your heart. Beautiful moment in nature, special time with a friend or loved one. An inspiring work of art, could be anything. Doesn't have to be the perfect thing, just whatever comes to mind. And now start to make this memory, this image, that moment, make it real in your mind's eye. So if there's a visual component, trying to sharpen the details. If there's sound, sensation, aroma. If it's a specific memory, trying to recall where you were, what time of day it was, the temperature of the air, the quality of the light. And as you contemplate this image or memory, just letting it in. Letting your heart feel nourished, soothed, or supported. Letting every pore of your skin, every cell of your body slowly open and receive the goodness, the beauty. Of that moment, of that connection. And like you're letting the sun warm your skin, or breathing in the smell of the air after the first rain. Just letting your whole being take in the joy, the goodness, the beauty of that moment, right here and now as you remember it, letting it fill you up inside. If your attention starts to drift, it's totally natural, normal. Just come back to the memory or the image. Reconnect with its vitality. And just receiving, letting yourself feel it. Notice if there's anywhere in your body feels warm or open, relaxed, grounded, flowing. Or anything else. And then in your own time, slowly allowing that image, that memory to dissolve, to fade into the background, but staying with the sense of being nourished. And then as you do, just considering some of the themes that we've touched on already this evening. Theme of courage. And just noticing if your capacity or access to courage feels any different, having taken just a few minutes to nourish and attend to your heart. Considering our capacity for compassion, to care, to receive and respond to pain skillfully. Does your access to compassion feel any different? Having taken just a few minutes to nourish yourself. And then in your own time, letting your eyes slowly start to open, bringing some movement into your body. Okay, for joining me. So what I'm hoping you might take away from that practice is two things. Is one, just the possibility of using like an image or a memory as a way of strengthening a certain capacity, feeling inside. So much of the most common meditation practices that get shared today focus on like calming, settling, feeling your breathing, being with what's happening. This isn't escapism. This is actually a very intentional application of our attention to say, let's bring in something useful and strengthen it. So that's one, is just using image or memory. And then the other is just this capacity to receive, to just let ourselves be nourished, to just try to recognize that we have that capacity and relish it, strengthen it a little bit. So thank you so much for your kind attention. We're going to turn over to the Q&A now and invite our host, Jamie, to join me and do some moderating here. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much. That was beyond. And we've received so many thank yous. That was wonderful, very impactful. And we do have a few questions. So I hope we can jump right in. I want to be mindful of the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe to back up just a little bit, Jen is wondering if you have any advice for someone new to the practice of meditation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, start small, keep it manageable, and do what makes sense. Like connect with a teacher, a teaching, a practice that makes sense to you. And be really, try to approach it with a spirit of adventure and play rather than trying to get it right. So consider it like an exploration and let's see what happens. There's no right experience to have, nothing's supposed to happen. What can I learn here? That's the best spirit to approach meditation with. And then seek out community, seek out others who are doing it, and explore and talk about it together. That's a great way to sustain your practice. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thanks. In Nakachi, and I apologize if I said your name incorrectly, but along those lines is wondering, these concepts of courage and compassion seem impossible to sustain without community to support and share the journey. Can you speak to what you see as the essential ingredients for courage and compassion beyond the scope of individual efforts?
No, Nakachi, you did pronounce her name right. Yeah, thank you. I couldn't agree with you more. And like one of the sort of central motifs in the chapter on courage is the sense of how we receive and learn courage from others. So I tell the story about a time when I felt really frightened and my mother comforted me, and how that kind of gave me courage and it's like allowed me to internalize it, and how I then hope to offer that courage to my son, and like this way to be there for ourselves. So like in that I mentioned developing courage in meditation. One of the things that gave me the most courage in meditation was thinking of my teachers and drawing on the strength of those relationships and those connections. I was looking for the actual passage. I don't know if I can find it in the moment. I think it's in a different chapter, but we think about the courage it takes, say, to look at our own conditioning, the ways we've internalized different patterns of oppression and so forth. Like, not only does it take courage, but as you're pointing to, it takes the support of others, to recollect our goodness, to grieve together. So I think in each of these qualities, and this is one of the things someone asked about the structure of the book, there are these there's sort of like different layers or different dimensions to the qualities. And there's an energetic dimension to the qualities, which is how they manifest in our body and our heart and our mind, how we can experience them on the level of sensation and energy when they're present, and how they can strengthen. There's this very, very personal aspects in terms of like our individual experiences and how we're applying our attention and cultivating them. There's relational aspects to them. So I talk about friendship and relationships in one part of the book, and how so many of the qualities are either reinforced and encouraged, or not reinforced and encouraged through our relationships in life, and how important friendship is for mirroring back to us our best qualities and also inspiring us in ways that we haven't developed yet. And then there's this larger context in which of larger sense of community, that's not just about an individual relationship, but even moving into the sense of belonging and home, connection with the earth, connection with life, and the way these qualities can sort of move through us in that way. That's beyond personal, where we're connected to something larger, and it feels like the qualities are just kind of moving through us. So I just appreciate your bringing that up and inviting me to acknowledge and share about it. Thanks, Nakachi. I hope that is sufficient.
Great. We have, maybe I can pick out a couple here, but Katie's question is something I think many of us struggle with. She said, this is probably the age-old question, but when life is so busy, it feels like you barely have time for dinner. How do you make time to connect with yourself and what you need? I recently started a much more active job in climate activism, and I keep saying make time for meditation on my to-do list, but I don't know how to fit in even 15 minutes, let alone time to reflect on what I'm doing, how I'm doing, and what I need.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question and the practicalness of it. I think there are periods in our lives, where that sense of capacity for anything else expands and contracts. And there is, I think, something to be said for just recognizing that there can be an arc to that and different rhythms to it. And so this is kind of where I would start, is just, in this moment, as we're here together, just reflecting and like, does it feel like it's always this way, or is it just like right now, right? Like, is this just, it's been the last month since I started the job and it feels like it's going to be this way for a while, but things are shifting. That's different, I think, than, no, this is how I live. Like, this is always how it feels for me. Those are distinct experiences that I think require a different kind of engagement. Because the former, if it's like, this is this period, there's some way in which we can kind of hang in there and we do our best, but then the external circumstances start to shift, and then that changes the internal circumstances. There's more capacity and we can engage in different ways. So some of that is just drawing on the resources you have, doing the best you can and getting through. And I think we all know this. We all have times like that. The other, and there might be elements of both present, I think requires a different approach of first starting to recognize, oh, I don't have 15 minutes, but do I have 1 minute? I don't have 2 minutes, but do I have 20 seconds? So being really practical about what it is to take a pause. This is something that, as a parent of a young child, it's like, yeah, I don't have 45 minutes to an hour to meditate every day anymore the way I used to, right? But I can make the most out of a short period of time, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 1 minute. But I'm able to just be fully present for that minute, even if my mind's going all over the place, to just allow that and keep coming back. Like, one moment of wholehearted present is incredibly powerful in consciousness. Just one moment. So set the bar really, really low, and don't underestimate the influence on this incredibly complex organic system called you of 1 moment of complete attention or pausing. This is the first thing. The second thing then is to look for times, look for things that you're doing that you can do without adding anything extra, and make into your self-care, your contemplation, your nourishment. So you probably spend some time walking every day, even if it's just from the office to the bathroom and back, right? If you're commuting for work, you're walking some distance. If you're eating, don't multitask. When you're bathing, be fully present. So there are ways that you can take daily activities that you're already doing and start using those as a kind of spiritual hygiene, mental and emotional hygiene, where instead of scrolling through your email while you're eating or planning for the work meeting while you're walking to the bus, it's like, just walk. Don't listen to a podcast. Just look at the trees. Just walk. Feel your body. When you're eating, just enjoy the food. Let your heart be nourished as you're nourishing your body with the presence. Okay, I can't do it for the whole 15 minutes. Fine, do it for 2 minutes. Set a timer. Make it really practical. So there's a reality to the challenges that you're facing in terms of the circumstances. But if you shift your frame and lower the bar, there's actually a lot of ways that you can start to build in more presence and self-care and transformative practice to nourish yourself. And then I think the kind of perspective you're looking for will begin to emerge of itself. The last thing I wanted to say is recognizing that, as I said earlier, like this, so important to align means with the end. So, what does it mean if we're working for a better future, but we're destroying our health in the process and stressed out and overwhelmed, right? How do we start to extricate ourselves from the systems of disconnection and overwork and sort of this extractive model of energy and productivity, and actually work in a way that is renewable, sustainable, holistic? You see what I'm saying? And yeah, it sounds great. It's hard to do, right? I'm not saying these things are simple or easy, but what's it like to start to have a vision of that? And how does that start to change your relationship with the underlying paradigm and the underlying ideas that push us to overwork, to not take time for ourselves, to be in these cycles that can be so addictive and eventually harmful and leading to burnout? We recognize what's driving them and have a different vision. That starts to provide more fuel and energy to do it differently. So I hope that's helpful. There's a lot more that could be said there, but that's where I would start.
Thank you. I want to share a comment from Jen, who said, "Thank you so much for the helpful message and encouragement to love and find balance. The idea of watering the seeds of what we want to cultivate isn't new to me, but I've yet to be mindful of this. Enjoy the worldview through your son. What a gift."
Lovely. Thanks, Jen.
So we're getting close to the end of the hour, and I want to thank everyone for being with us. And thank you, Oren. I hope we're all feeling a little bit more calm and collected than we might have been before the event started. I want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. Everyone will receive an email tomorrow. It'll have a link to the recording. It'll have a link to the book. It'll have a link to his previous titles. It will basically have everything you need, more information, where to find it. And as I mentioned before, for book purchases before the 23rd, they went out in Friday's mail. Anything on the 23rd or after, I will be mailing tomorrow. So thank you for joining us. And is there any way that people can get involved? Is your website the best way to find out more information about you?
Yeah. Website, orenjaysofer.com. I have other events and workshops and trainings and things coming up. And I have an email list. I send out a couple of emails a month with a reflection, a practice, a link to a video or a meditation. So that's also a really great way to stay in touch. If you're not on there, I'd love to stay in touch that way. Jamie, thank you so much for inviting me and for hosting. It's been a real pleasure. And everyone, thank you so much for joining. I'm really touched that you took time out of your life to be here and that you're interested in the book. I hope it nourishes and supports you, your loved ones, and our communities.
Thank you so much. And have a nice evening, everyone. We will see you soon. Bye.
Care.